Hello, BookTube. I have here The Royal Book of Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. Now, it's actually been a few years since I last talked about an Oz book on this channel. So to recap briefly my history with the Oz books, I never read them as a kid, but I was always curious about them as a kid. My elementary school library had several of the Oz books. The public library in my town had several more of them. And I was aware that there was this long-running fantasy series, and I was curious what it might be like to read through the whole series and see how the story evolves, see the world building, see how the different characters change or evolve over time. I've always been curious about long-running stories, long-running fantasy stories in particular. But never got around to it, partly because I just never knew where to start as a kid. But a few years ago, back when I was in Vietnam, in the bookstores in Vietnam, they were selling the complete Oz stories of L. Frank Baum, which is the first 14 stories in the Oz series, all by the original author, L. Frank Baum, all in one volume. So I bought it and I read through it. I did it as a buddy read with Dane Cobain over at Dane Reads. We tried to do one Oz story every 2 weeks. But then when I got to the end of that volume, there were no more Oz stories. So after the original author, L. Frank Baum, died, the publishers continued the story by having other authors write other Oz stories. And eventually, there were 40 canonical Oz stories, continuing from L. Frank Baum's death in 1920 all the way up to, I believe it was 1963. So these are the other books in the Oz series. I was unable to track them down in Vietnam, at least not in paper form, which is how I prefer to read them. Some of the ones that are in the public domain are available on Project Gutenberg, etc. But I like to read a paper copy. But now that I'm back in the United States, I'm able to get these books through interlibrary loan. So I decided to pick up where I left off with book number 15, The Royal Book of Oz, the first book published after the death of the original author, L. Frank Baum. So Dane, if you're watching this video, I know I'm 3 years late on this, but I'm jumping back into our buddy read here with The Royal Book of Oz. Dane published his review of this book 3 years ago. I'll link to his video in the description down below. But here I am 3 years late on this book. So, right, the Oz franchise at this point. I think both Dane and I were feeling a little bit done with the Oz series by the time we got to the end of L. Frank Baum's books. The authors seemed to have run out of ideas. The stories were repetitive. The themes were repetitive. Most of the stories just involved a journey from one part of Oz to the other, encountering strange creatures along the way. Some of it was well done. Some of it you got the impression that L. Frank Baum was just trying to meet a deadline or wanted to get a book out for money reasons. At least that was my impression. So it was with somewhat mixed feelings that I returned to the Oz series, because on one hand I was thinking, okay, I could easily be done with this series. On the other hand, there's a part of me that hates to stop a project that I've already started. And plus, I am kind of curious to see how the Land of Oz develops over time as I go through the next few decades in the Oz books. So, yeah, I'm giving it a try here with the Royal Book of Oz. Now, I've read a few reviews of this book and listened to a few of them on BookTube. And a lot of people mention that they notice a distinct change in the writing style between the original author L. Frank Baum and Ruth Plumly Thompson. I'm going to go against popular opinion here and say that I actually didn't notice a big difference in style. Now, maybe that's been because it's been 2 or 3 years since I last read an Oz book by L. Frank Baum. So maybe that gap accounts for not noticing a difference in writing style or it being a little bit foggy in my memory maybe. But I picked this up and I thought, yeah, this is just like the Oz books. Same tone, same kind of whimsical characters and world. I really didn't notice much of a difference at all. Now, take me with a grain of salt. I seem to be a minority opinion, but this seemed to be just very much more of the same. Or is it? Actually, let's explore that a little bit. Most of the Oz books, as I mentioned before, are traveling from point A to point B and encountering strange creatures along the way. I guess arguably this one is a little bit different in that the Scarecrow is stuck in one place for most of the book. And there's a little bit of a palace intrigue or a palace plot. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me set up the story here. So we open with the familiar characters from the Oz series. There's the Professor Wogglebug, who I believe was introduced in book number 2, if I'm remembering correctly. And he has a great idea, Professor Wogglebug's great idea. He's going to create a royal book of the Oz genealogy. Now, as Marie Ness points out in her always excellent reviews at Tor.com, this is kind of an inexplicable idea because Oz doesn't really have a genealogy. The characters don't grow old and die. They don't seem to give birth. A lot of them have no parentage. Characters like the Scarecrow or the Scraps the Rag Doll or any other characters, Jack Pumpkinhead, seem to have been created out of nowhere by magic or inventiveness. TikTok is another one. I mean, there's a whole list of Oz characters which are just created rather than being born. So the idea of having a royal genealogy book doesn't fit with Oz at all. But for some reason, Professor Wogglebug gets this idea. And while he's creating the genealogy, the Scarecrow becomes upset because he realizes that he has no family tree. You know, he was just created by a munchkin out of straw and put up on a beanpole one day. And no ancestry to speak of. Now, as I mentioned, that's true for a lot of the Oz characters. But for some reason, it upsets the Scarecrow particularly. And again, this is one of those things that you just have to go with. I mean, there's no reason why it should upset the Scarecrow as much as it does. The Scarecrow has never been particularly sensitive about this in any of the other books. But the Scarecrow goes back to the cornfield where he originated to try and find his family tree. And he finds the beanpole where he had been first hoisted upon. And he meets the munchkin who had created him. But the Scarecrow has no interest in talking to him. And he starts digging in the earth. And then the earth collapses beneath him. And he is falling down a shaft where the beanpole is. He encounters a couple creatures known as the Middlings on his way down to the center of the earth. But after a short encounter there, he just falls all the way down, where he lands in a land called what's it called? Silverland, where there are the Silvermen, which is, maybe you can see in this illustration, a stand-in for stereotypes of Chinese people. And then we get to the point that every reviewer of this book has to mention, which is this book unfortunately traffics in ethnic stereotypes. There is a lot of stereotyping of Asian people. I guess it's supposed to be Chinese or Japanese here. And this has not aged well. And in fact, can you see this here? There's an editor's note attached to this edition saying something to the effect of, what is it here? Oh, no, actually, sorry. That's actually not what I thought it was. Sorry. That editor's note is, I'm getting my editor's note mixed up. The editor's note here is to clarify that the introduction by L. Frank Baum's widow, Maud G. Baum, is actually not true. So when this was originally published, L. Frank Baum's widow wrote an introduction saying that this story was based on notes that her husband had left. The editor's note here is clarifying that this is actually fiction. Fiction being the polite word, I guess. Lie would be another way to say it. But, it's a children's book. They're trying to maintain continuity for the children. So we'll go with fiction. Sorry, that's not what I thought I was looking for. What I thought I was looking for was the publisher's note, which is a couple pages earlier, which says, this book was first published in 1921 and reflects some ideas and biases which were deemed acceptable at that time, but have since been repudiated by a more tolerant and understanding generation. The original text and illustrations are presented here in their entirety for the purpose of historical accuracy and to maintain the book's authenticity. The views expressed herein, however, in no way reflect those of the publisher, nor are condoned by them. And just for the record, I support that. I don't like it when publishers edit books to take out offensive material. I think we should leave books as they were originally published for the purposes of authenticity and historical accuracy. At the same time, though, you do have to say, yeah, this is wrong. So, for the record, yeah, these stereotypes of Chinese people are not good. Now, I don't want to make too much of this because it's low-hanging fruit. A book published in 1921 has some outdated stereotypes about Chinese people. I don't know how many older books I've read that have outdated stereotypes in them. I think if you read old books, anything published before 1950, you've encountered this a lot. So, you do have to say, yeah, it's not good. On the other hand, I think it's a little bit pedantic to make too much of it. So, yeah, let me just say, it's not good. It would be pedantic to make too much of it, so let's move on. So, according to the plot, though, the Silverman people, who are stand-ins for the Chinese people, believe that the Scarecrow is the reincarnation of the spirit of their last emperor, who was, killed or banished by a magician. And it was predicted that his spirit would return in 50 years. So when the Scarecrow returned, it had been exactly 50 years since the prophecy, and they were convinced that the Scarecrow was the reincarnation of their emperor. As the story goes on, it seems that the Scarecrow has absolutely nothing in common with this emperor whose spirit he is supposed to be reincarnating. And I was fully expecting at the end to find out that definitively the Scarecrow was not does not have the spirit of the old emperor, that the spirit of the old emperor was somewhere else, or that the old emperor was in the back room somewhere, or, you know, we're going to find out definitively that the Scarecrow was not the old emperor. Spoiler alert, though, the book ends with that still being ambiguous. So the Scarecrow leaves the land of the Silvermen and goes back up to the land of Oz, with it still being, the possibility still being left open that he might be the reincarnation of this emperor, presumably without knowing it. I guess, you know, his memories got erased during the process of reincarnation. But yeah, I mean, refresh my memory. What was the origin story of the Scarecrow from the original Oz books? He was created by the Munchkin, and then he just came alive for no reason, right? Right? That was the origin. I'm not overlooking some magical explanation that was introduced later, right? So I guess that would fill in maybe a gap in the Oz story about why did the Scarecrow come alive in the first place? Because when he was made, the spirit of the emperor came into his body. So yeah, maybe the Scarecrow is the reincarnated spirit of the emperor of the Silvermen. Who knows? Becoming the emperor of the Silvermen, the Scarecrow has a number of problems. First of all, he doesn't want to be the emperor of the Silvermen. The Silvermen, being Chinese stereotypes, have a number of silly court protocols that the Scarecrow doesn't want to be involved with. In the book, they're all prostrating themselves to the Scarecrow. And when everyone bows down, it creates a gust of wind that lifts the Scarecrow up. It kind of blows him up onto the ceiling or blows him away. Which I don't remember that being a factor in previous Oz books. And again, I could be forgetting. It has been a couple of years. But in the previous Oz books, the Scarecrow wasn't that light, right? He wasn't blown away every time somebody would bow down. So yeah, maybe that is another difference between L. Frank Baum and Ruth Plumly Thompson. So yeah, that's the issue number one. Scarecrow doesn't like it. Issue number two is that the land of the Silvermen is invaded by the Golden people, and the Scarecrow has to defend his kingdom against these invaders, which he's able to do with the aid of a magic fan. And then issue number three is that the sons of the original emperor are not happy to see him back. And they're not happy to see him back in an indestructible form, like the Scarecrow, which doesn't age and doesn't grow old and die, because they think that their father is supposed to be like 87 now and should be close to dying, and they are looking to forward to their father dying and for them to inherit the throne. So those are the issues that the Scarecrow is facing. And like I said earlier, perhaps that is different than most of the rest of the Oz books, which are mostly just wander around and meet strange people type stories. But while the Scarecrow is in the land of the Silvermen, Dorothy goes looking for him. And Dorothy and the Cowardly Lion initially go on their own. And then as they wander around, they meet strange people. Now, I guess one of the oddities of these Oz books is that L. Frank Baum was very good, well, very good might be stretching it. He was okay, he was good at creating inventive new characters for each Oz book. But he was not so good at finding things to do for the characters he had already created. So with each Oz book, we get the court of Ozma, the Princess of Oz, is getting bigger and bigger with all these strange creatures. But they have increasingly less and less to do because they just sit around the palace. And then every adventure, L. Frank Baum would introduce new strange creatures. So, yeah, I guess another way to look at it is the strange creatures are always one note. They have a certain oddity, you encounter them, but then once you've encountered them and their oddity, the novelty of their new strangeness has worn out, then there's nothing left for them to do in subsequent books. And this book is another one where instead of sticking with the Oz characters we've already got, we are introduced to new characters. So there is Sir Hokus, who is a knight, presumably from the time of King Arthur, although he's not entirely sure about that, who gets banished to the land of Oz, and Dorothy and the Cowardly Lion find him in the land of the Pokes, where he's imprisoned by a bunch of slow pokes. There's a lot of puns in this book. But they rescue him from there. And then they go on a few more adventures. They come to a land where the people stay perfectly stationary. Yeah, the people stay perfectly stationary, but the furniture moves everywhere. So here we have the moving beds. So that's one of the strange places they go to. And then they also meet two camels who have come to the land of Oz via a sandstorm. I guess it's well established that storms bring people into the land of Oz. So there's the comfortable camel in the doubtful dromedary. So these are the new characters for this adventure. According to the review from Marie Ness on Tor.com and also to Wikipedia, these characters would later be reused in subsequent books by Ruth Plumly Thompson. So I guess the Sir Hokus the Knight and the comfortable camel and the doubtful dromedary, I guess we can expect to see them in future Oz books. So actually, while I'm on the topic here, let me make a brief digression to talk about the pictures. So the previous Oz books I read, because they were in the collection, The Complete Stories of Oz, which had 14 stories in one volume, there were no pictures in the previous edition I read. Even though the pictures are supposed to be an important part of the Oz franchise. What I used to do when I was reading from that previous volume is I'd read the book and then I'd go to the Project Gutenberg to see all the pictures I had missed out on, just because the illustrations were always an important part of these books when they were being published. But so now I'm finally reading a book that has pictures in it. But what is odd to me is that the pictures never seem to line up with the text. So, for example, can you see this here? This is, we're up to page 95 here in the text. And the picture is from page 105. So when we start out at the beginning of the book, the full color illustrations are only a few pages ahead of the page numbers. So here we have page 30, full color illustration from page 34. So okay, this is coming up 4 pages too early. That's not terrible. But as we keep going through the book, we get so that the pictures are further and further. So here, this is page 126, but the picture is illustrating page 141. So sometimes the pictures will be like 2 chapters ahead of where we are in the text. And I don't know anything about publishing. I don't know how difficult it is to get the pictures to line up with the text, but it can't be that difficult, right? Why is it so hard to get the pictures in the text to line up? I don't. Okay, so the nice full color pictures are nice, but why are they 20 pages early than the events they're illustrating in the text? I mean, I come across it, I see the picture, and okay, I'll just have to hold this picture in my memory when I get to this scene 20 pages later. Thanks for spoiling this for me, picture. I don't know. The pictures were nice. I always like a little bit of full color pictures. I like pictures in my books as much as anyone else. But why can't the pictures match the text? I don't understand that. Okay. Anyways, eventually, the 2 of them line up. Dorothy gets on a wishing road, and she wishes her group finds the scarecrow. So then they're all in the land of the Silvermen. According to Marie Ness at Tor.com, this would be a standard plot device of Ruth Plumly Thompson, which is to have an A plot and a B plot going on concurrently. So in this case, I guess the A plot is the Scarecrow is in the land of the Silvermen. The B plot is that Dorothy and the Cowardly Lion are wandering around Oz having adventures where they are looking for the Scarecrow and also meeting other strange creatures. Marie Ness is of the opinion that a lot of the times this didn't work to have two concurrent plots going on. And yeah, I guess that is another difference between L. Frank Baum. Boy, the more I talk, the more differences I am admittedly thinking of. That's the danger of doing this unscripted. I started out by saying I didn't notice any difference between Ruth Plumly Thompson and L. Frank Baum, and the more I talk, the more it's beginning to dawn on me. I think L. Frank Baum did have a couple books where he had 2 concurrent plot lines going on at the same time, if memory serves. But it wasn't his preferred way of doing it. He usually just had one group of characters on a journey encountering certain things. Anyways, all the characters end up in the land of the Silvermen. They escape from the land of the Silvermen and go back to the land of Oz, where they are reunited with Ozma and the rest of the Oz characters. And there you go. So, yeah, like I said, a lot of unfortunate stereotypes in this book. I think the charitable way to look at it would be to say that Ruth Plumly Thompson, like L. Frank Baum, is just looking for a kind of a silly fairy tale-esque setting. And so the book's not meant to represent the real China so much as it is just to represent a stereotype of China as a setting for a fairy tale type children's tale. That's me being charitable, of course. The uncharitable explanation, of course, is that these are racist and derogatory stereotypes. Yeah, we can debate which explanation you think is most likely. But yeah, that's the book. And I, like a lot of these Oz books, I wasn't all that impressed, but it was an easy enough read. I'm not sure what pace I'm going to do this at, but I will try and nibble away some of the rest of these Oz books in the future. So I'll see if I can get the next book out from the interlibrary loan, And then once I've reviewed that, I'll return with a video on that one. Thank you, BookTube.